We are going to get started. I'm letting a few more people in, but for those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Wachin Yanu, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing Partnerships here at the WNBA Chicago Sky. And this is our Kickoff to Pride event. We are super excited to have the guests that we have, but before we start, I'm gonna ask if you are not a presenter, if you could turn your cameras off and make sure that you are on mute. I'm also gonna go off once I'm done with the intro, but we celebrate Pride in a huge way most years, but as you guys know, this is a very different season. We are not in the arena this year. We don't have our game as we normally would, and so we stopped to think about what we could do that would still be as impactful for our Sky fans, and to also have you connect with some people in the Chicagoland area who are doing the work for the LGBTQ community all year round, not just during Pride Month, and that's how this idea came about. As you all may know, our official Pride sponsor is Avis, and we are very excited to have to partner with them again this year for this event. My hope is that this conversation will inspire you to show up a little bit differently in the spaces that you occupy, and give you the permission that you may or may not need to be yourself and feel pride in whoever it is that you are and how you choose to show up. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Anna DeShawn. I will be monitoring the comments to get the questions that you may have that she doesn't cover. So put your comments or your questions in the chat box. And then without further ado, Anna,
thanks for watching. Thanks everybody for joining today. I'm Anna DeShawn. I'm founder and CEO of E3 Radio, which is an online radio station playing queer and independent music in high rotation. I'm thankful that the Sky asked me to moderate this panel. This is a panel of friends. And so I'm excited that y'all have joined us for this conversation. We're gonna start with some introductions, because I think we can start there and then we can jump in. Like Wachin said, I would really love for most of this conversation to be about questions from you all. I mean, we could talk all day, and I think most of us do, but it's more impactful if we actually talk about things that you all are interested in. So as we go along, please type those questions in. So first up, I'd love for all the panelists to introduce yourselves, provide your name, your personal pronoun, what you do, and why you do it. So Tracy, I'll start with you.
My name's Tracy Baim. I'm publisher of the Chicago Reader newspaper, and I'm co-founder of Windy City Times in 1985. So I've been working in LGBTQ community media since 1984. Since I'm sure way before all of the Chicago Sky people were born, I watched the various different women's pro sports in Chicago over many years, including for the last 15 years, the Chicago Sky. I live 1 block away from the new stadium, so I'm anxious for it to get started again. And I use she, her pronouns.
Perfect. Jeremy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Holston. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm super excited to be here with everyone today. I am currently the director of the LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois, somewhere else that Tracy is also a founder of, so many hats, many places. I guess what I do, because it's exciting to be at an organization that's talking about a different perspective that brings value and opportunity to our LGBTQ plus community. So so proud to be an advocate in making sure that LGBTQ folks are able to access entrepreneurship opportunities and all the available resources, and looking forward to today's conversation.
Wonderful. And Stefanie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stefanie Dolson. I'm on the Chicago Sky from upstate New York, and I'm also super excited to be here and be part of this conversation. I'm looking forward to hear everyone on the panel speak, and just gonna enjoy it.
Indeed. And so once again, if folks are joining late, the ask is that you turn your webcams off and that you go on mute, but that you ask us some questions. So whenever I'm doing these panels, I always like to start actually with a why question, because I think that really gets to the heart of why folks join panels, why people do what they do, what they're passionate about. And so, Stefanie, I want to start with you in this case. Why say yes to this particular panel about being unapologetically you?
For me, it was an easy yes, because it's literally like how I've lived my life my entire life. You know, being tall, being kind of out there all the time has always made me stick out. So I always say, like, if people are going to stare, give them something fun to look at. So for me, I've just always been myself. And I think it's really important for everyone to live that way. So to speak about that and to have other amazing people speak on it was an easy choice to come talk and be a part of it.
Wonderful. And Jeremy, how about you?
Sure. So of course, it was also sort of a no-brainer. You know, when you get an invitation from the home team, I feel like you always take up on it. So that was definitely, again, a no-brainer. And then again, the opportunity to just be able to have this conversation with the others on the panel, folks that I know and admire, it's just really exciting. And then, you know, again, just realizing where we are, especially in light of recent activities around the murder of George Floyd, as a Black out gay man, especially this conversation, I think is really important about living authentically, unapologetically living yourself. And so really just being committed to that and trying to be an example in whatever case that might be for other folks to follow and live their own life the way they choose to.
Sure. Tracy.
You know, my whole life was changed because of Title IX. I was born in 1963. Title IX came into play right at the time I joined Little League. I passed as a boy at the first half of the season, and then by the second half of the season, I didn't. And my coach was accepting, and there were lawsuits that were happening around the country to allow girls to play sports that were available. And so I know that women's sports have changed the trajectory of the women's movement and the LGBTQ movement, because sports really transforms individuals, especially team sports. I played soccer for 25 years. I got to travel around the world well before there was a Women's World Cup. And I know the transformative power of sports. And oftentimes LGBTQ people were either stereotyped. For women, they were often stereotyped as being jocks, or for men, they were left out of sports because of stereotypes. And then, of course, for transgender people, they have been fighting for their place at the table for a long time. So I see that sports, from Jackie Robinson to Renee Richards to Billie Jean King, help propel our society forward. And I think having women's sports is so critical to our society. And I know how precarious often women's sports are. So anything I can do to be an amplification for the role of sports in society, I'll step up and do.
100%. As an athlete who grew up playing on the boys basketball team, because there wasn't a girls team at my grammar school, right? And that being something that I held with me all the time, I totally get that. I think sports are something that touch everybody. And when movement is made in sports, it really can impact people in a personal way. And so this actually leads me to a question I had later on, but Stefanie, I think this is a good one for you. In regards to women's basketball, how have you seen the game change in regards to being able to be unapologetically you, in regards to being out? Since you've been involved, how have you seen it change over time?
Surprisingly, I feel like we've been kind of ahead of the game when it comes to the WNBA. When I first was in the league, I mean, there were so many openly out women, and that's kind of what helped me be so comfortable with myself, is because we have so many women in the league that are so confident and so aware of their surroundings, and they know who they are. So in the, 7 years now, I don't think it's changed much, because like I said, like, we've just been ahead of the curve when it comes to celebrating Pride Month and celebrating everyone's individualities.
Yeah. As a season ticket holder for the Chicago Sky, I love Pride. Hey, indeed. I love Pride Month. I walk in, the whole stadium is just full of rainbows. One year the seats were covered. You feel like there's some intentionality behind it. It's not an afterthought. And I know that that's been appreciated by me and my other friends who also attend all the games. So this was an easy yes for me as well. Jeremy, I want to kind of piggyback off of what you started in regards to what's going on in society and sort of living at the intersections of being a Black gay man. When we talk about living authentically and unapologetically, you know, sometimes that can come at a cost, right? We all know freedom is not free. So can you talk a little bit about how living authentically may have come at a cost for you, or the challenges you may have encountered by just being who you are?
Sure. So I think there are, examples of, me living authentically and even not living authentically that have sort of come into play and have limited sort of my somewhat abilities. Prior to coming to the chamber, I did fundraising consulting, primarily working on religious projects, helping churches to raise funds. And so was doing that work for 2.5 years. I may have had one or two people that I was out to, and it wasn't necessarily a shame or something that I didn't want to talk about. It was more so that we were just, we were just coworkers. It wasn't, that's about as good as I can say. We were just we were all people just working, trying to raise dollars. And so it wasn't like a culture of, being connected and building relationships. So that didn't, it just wasn't that major a factor. But after I had been there for 2 years, I was looking to sort of get promoted to doing other projects outside of the religious sector, or at the very minimum, being able to lead projects on my own within that space. As we were wrapping up, I communicated that I was interested in these opportunities. And my manager at the time was like, you don't have the type of personality that so many others have here. They seem to be not sort of loosely what he said is, they have these bright personalities. They're super motivated. They do this and they do that. And it was crazy because I had raised tons of money, had done so well, more than most people, but being that I hadn't, I guess, shown up with my full personality, with the full person that I really wasn't building relationships with the people who I was working with and who were the clients on my projects. And so by not really just being able to show up proud and to just have conversations comfortably, I think that greatly impacted my opportunities there. And then even now, being at the chamber, one of the things that we advocate for is the LGBT Business Enterprise Certification. So advocating for LGBT-owned businesses to be able to spend with the city, county, or state here within Illinois. As a Black man, it is very interesting being in those conversations sometimes because a lot of people often think that the certification is only a benefit for white gay men. And so it's very interesting, even with my own friends, as I'm at city hearings, as I'm out in the community, it's very interesting having those conversations with people about why I am, as a Black man, am advocating for those issues and that activity. And so it's a lot of interesting sort of conversations and just challenges that sort of come with it. But like all of you, we just push forward and just make awesomeness happen.
Indeed. I think you raise interesting points around being out at work. I think, I don't have the stats at my fingertips, but there's still a fair amount of folks who don't feel comfortable being out at work, or who don't show up as their full selves just because maybe it's not a safe environment to do so. Tracy, I'll take this question to you. I mean, as a person who's in media myself, I look up to Tracy, and she hears that from me often. She's been doing this since '84. We're both Drake alums. I just like to align with Tracy any way I can. And so when you talk about what you've done for LGBTQ media with Windy City Times, right? And all the publications you've started and maintained, now you're publishing the Chicago Reader. How has being, and I'm sorry if everyone could mute your phones, who's joining. How has being unapologetic, living your true self, has that come at any cost to you and for you, or tell us what you think?
Absolutely, but what's interesting is I prevented it on the front end, so I can't even tell you the cost. When I graduated in 1984 from Drake University, everybody told me I couldn't be openly gay and be a journalist. So I said, okay, well, I will be a typesetter. And then 2 weeks after I got back to Chicago from Des Moines, Iowa, my mother heard about a gay newspaper called Gay Life, and I've got some copies of gay papers here if anybody ever wants to see them. And I was like, oh, there's a gay newspaper? I thought it was like the only job I could ever get. It was like at Ms. Magazine, so I'd have to move to New York or something. So I didn't even know there was a gay press. So I lucked into working in the gay press immediately, like within 2 weeks of graduation in college, and I never looked back. My stepfather worked at the Chicago Tribune. He said, you cannot be openly gay and be here. He was protecting me. He had gay friends at the Tribune who could not be out and be themselves. My mother worked at the Chicago Defender at the time. Basically in mainstream media, you couldn't be openly gay and be seen as a reporter, a journalist. So I kind of on the front end prevented it. And what ended up happening was I built my own way and built my own career. And that allowed me to stay in my own career for now 36 years. Most of my peers in the 1980s didn't hardly last into the 1990s in journalism, because journalism is such a weird career track. Economically, it's hard to raise a family on it. I know I would have made more money in the mainstream, but I think my career would have been truncated. Like I might not have lasted more than 5 or 10 years under the ways that the mainstream media operates. So I feel kind of lucky. I know that economically I took a hit, but I have been so free to do the kind of journalism that I love to do that I would never change that. So being unapologetically lesbian, openly lesbian in 1984, there were only probably a few thousand of us in the whole state of Illinois that were willing to use our own names, our own photo, and do the work. In fact, most of the people that worked at Gay Life newspaper used fake names, which I didn't even know until they would leave. And they would tell me, well, if you got a reference check for this name, that's me. And don't tell them it's a gay paper, use the corporate name. I mean, I didn't even know my colleagues were not even using their real names. So I don't regret any of my decisions. I know that it wouldn't have been for everybody. I just got really lucky in having terrific family support, whose mother in 1984 would have told them to go work at a gay job of any kind. So I've really tried to use that and help other people that are also trying to navigate alternate careers, like you, Anna, with E3 Radio. You're making your own thing, right? You're making a name for yourself, doing your own product, because that's the best fit for you right now. And it's always been the right fit for me. Yeah,
100%. Stefanie, I'm always interested. I mean, you've got a huge fan base. I mean, we don't need to talk about how much of a fan I am. UConn, Chicago Sky, you've been an all-star, all that good stuff. Coming out, right? How have you felt the fans support you, your family? What does it mean to be an outplay in the WNBA?
Honestly, it was easy. I mean, it was really, like Tracy said, like I was really lucky. My family's huge supporters of myself. The minute I told my mom and dad actually gave me a high five. My mom was like, I was like, okay, that was weird. And then he wanted to see my girlfriend. He gave me a high five. He was like, let me see a picture. I was like, oh my God. So anyway, and then it was kind of the same reaction with my peers, my teammates. They were all super just supportive, and they understood. The fans, I haven't really gotten a lot of backlash. I think, we have a lot of LGBTQ fans. Our fan base is very huge with that. So they were just supportive, and was happy that I was coming out and telling them my true self. Because I think as a player, it's really hard because we never really get a connection with our fans. So for them to know something else about me was, I think, really special for them, but it was also really special for me. So, the more I can let fans in, hopefully the more they like me. So yeah, I was really lucky, and I love my fans, my family, and my teammates.
Yeah, and tell me, what do you think other sports can actually learn from the WNBA and from women's sports in general in regards to what it means to be unapologetic and empowering their players to be that way, and to sort of create that inclusive environment where other folks can feel safe coming out in the same ways?
Yeah, I think exactly what you just said is, I think what they can learn is creating that inclusive environment. I think one of the nicest things was that feeling of safety to come out. So I think if other women's leagues kind of take that on, it'll just be easier for them to be themselves. And then ultimately, because we're, athletics, when you're true to yourself, you end up playing better. It all shows on the field, on the court. So I think when it comes to other teams or other sports, if they create that environment, I mean, I'm not like a genius right now. I don't actually know.
I mean, but it sounds right to me.
I would think that they could be better on the field. So
there you go. Who knows? Maybe someone should give it a try. I think there's much to be done, especially in men's sports. I think that there's a lot of notions around what it means to be a man. And I think there's a lot of work to be done around tearing down some of those toxic masculinity ideas that we have. So hopefully we see more men coming out in sports as well. here. We're moving through this conversation. I hope you all are enjoying it. Please start sending in your questions. So we really want to hear from you throughout this conversation towards the end here, okay? Jeremy, I want to start this question with you. It is Pride Month. I know that's why the Chicago Sky wanted to host this particular panel. But I have to be honest, right? It's a little hard to feel prideful this month. It's tough. There's a lot going on in the world, right? So we're living in the midst of COVID. We're living in the midst of these uprisings right now across the country. Does it feel like pride to you?
Of course, through all of the marketing, it somewhat feels like pride. Everyone has their great pride products and rainbow flags all over the place. So somewhat in that sense, it somewhat does, but not really. You know, it's, so of course, you know, not even just recognizing everything else, you know, usually this time of the year, you know, we'd be having these types of conversations in person. We'd be preparing for the Pride Parade, I guess this weekend, possibly. There's just a whole spirit, I think, that Chicago has during Pride Month that is just absolutely awesome. I'm originally from Alabama. I moved to Springfield before moving here to Chicago. And so I've never lived in a place like Chicago and the way that it celebrates Pride. And so not being able to have those experiences definitely, I think, has removed some of that for us this year. But then the other things that you talked about, of course, even with COVID, you know, it's really just changed the way that we are coming together and celebrating Pride. Unfortunately, so many people have lost loved ones, our coworkers, and so it's hard to be able to celebrate Pride for that reason. Many people are without jobs, don't know what, you know, next week is going to look like, and so it's hard for people, I think, to really just be focused on celebrating our history at this moment, just because their own personal life might be having some turmoil. And then, of course, even as you talked about the civil unrest, again, I think it was interesting, the timing of it, of everything, especially like leading right into Pride. My hope is that we were going to see more organizations think more about inclusion, so making sure that they highlighted more Black voices, more women, more people of color. I've seen that somewhat at some organizations. At some, it's you can tell they're still on that long journey to get there. So no. Long answer to that, no. It doesn't quite feel like it, but it does help being able to either participate or come and watch conversations like this. And then that way we can sort of be reminded about what it is to celebrate and is to be a part of this community.
Yeah. Tracy, you've lived a lot of Chicago Prides. How different is this one?
Yeah, you know, I really, on June 1st, I was like, I don't have no pride to give this year. Mm-hmm. This is a reckoning within the mainstream, but it's also a reckoning within the LGBT community, which reflects the exact racism of mainstream society. And so I was like, you know, this is I was almost glad that it came in to be this month, because it confronted the dual problems of racism within our community and in the mainstream, and forced, there was even a picket of a lesbian bar because of racism by one of the co-owners. Those kinds of things, to me, are progress, because the racism within our community is some of the hardest stuff I've ever had to cover and watch happen and try to be a change agent around. So I'm grateful for the activists that are willing to put their lives on the line in the streets, as well as those who are working for change in the boardrooms and other places. It's a little bit reminiscent of kind of the late 80s, early 90s Pride Parade, where you did have a lot of celebration, but you also had people with AIDS and HIV often leading the parade and you know, leading with their lives, like that they knew that this was probably their last Pride Parade, or their last march or their last protest. And yet they knew that they didn't want to give up their whole selves. They wanted to celebrate the part of their life that had been so ostracized by their families or the mainstream. So I do think there's always a time for protest, and there is always a time for pride. This month, I'm glad that pride is taking a back seat in many ways. Like this Sunday, there are different protest march, Black Lives Matter protests that are LGBTQ. The thing that I find most heartening of the last few years is that the Black Lives Matter movement, in fact, was started by 3 Black queer women. The Black Lives Matter movement has been so LGBT inclusive from day one. the new racial justice movements are very, very inclusive, and they are leading by example to how our LGBT organizations should be far more representative of the communities they are part of. And most of them, especially their boards of directors and their donors and all sorts of others, are not representative of our whole communities. So I'm always cautiously optimistic, but I feel like so much of what's happening right now is happening across our whole LGBTQ community and mainstream in a good way. Like, I hope we don't come out of it the same. Do not want to go back to the old normal. We need a new normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stefanie, what about you? Does it feel like Pride?
They both said everything that I've been thinking. So just have them answer. Those were.
Yeah, 100%. To Tracy's point, June 1st arrived and I was like, oh my God, it's Pride. Because usually by then there would have been requests for panels, promotions, overwhelmed by Facebook invitations to events. Your June is stacked. It's like the busiest time of the year for anybody doing this work. And I was like, where are the people? We are tired. And we are protesting and folks are like, I don't have no pride to give, per Tracy. So anybody that's tuning in here on the Zoom, I'd love to hear from you all. I mean, does it feel like Pride to you this month? Feel free just to type it in the chat. Love to hear from you on that. It definitely feels different. And I think that we can all are due for a little bit of a new feeling around Pride. So
we have a quick question. So it says, my job's Pride Network recently held a webinar titled Intersectionality, the Black and LGBTQ Experience. How have the panelists felt about navigating being multi-identified during these times?
Thanks, Watcher. You were like the voice of God coming down. I didn't even realize. Great question, Keisha. I don't know. Jeremy, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I think, I've sort of navigated it so far from two perspectives. First, being a Black LGBTQ person, throughout the time we've seen, people protest in very many ways. We've seen how people have been very active on Facebook and social media and commenting, etc. That's not quite, I'm not that active on social media, so that's not quite what works for me. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do is really within my own spaces where I know folks is try to find out how I can be a resource. So particularly being that I'm able to work with nearly 300 businesses across Illinois, 30 of them being corporate companies located here in Chicago, I now have the opportunity to say, hey, people, I went to an awesome historically Black college and university. Cheers to Alabama State University. Great school, great opportunities. If you are somehow lacking talent, if you don't know how to find Black people to come and work for you, someone is either not doing their job or they're lying to you on how they're outreaching for those people. And so making myself available to say, hey, let me be a resource to you in finding where those people are to help you fill those pipelines that you need some assistance with. And then even within within our own Black community, has been a lot of really just trying to be an advocate for our LGBTQ community. It has been great to see that overall, the Black Lives Matter has been inclusive, but we do know we still see examples where that is not necessarily the case. And so trying to talk to folks that I know, organizations that I know to really talk to people about why LGBTQ rights and lives matter and how to be an ally to folks like myself and others who are my friends and in this community as well. So just trying to be an advocate for one, Black people and young professionals trying to get opportunities, and then just making sure that my other Black LGBTQ folks are able to be our authentic selves in our own community.
Yeah, I'll take this one as well. I think for me, my life hasn't changed much in terms of the work that we need to do. So I think I just make it a point to show up as my full self, no matter where I'm showing up. I think oftentimes There's been times in my life where people wanted me to show up as being Black, and it was safe for that was comfortable for folks. And then other times it's comfortable for folks for me to show up as being queer, and that's great. But at this point in my life, and has been the case for quite some time, I just refuse to do that. I'm just going to show up as my full self, and people can take it as they can take it. I think that's very important, because people need to see examples of folks like me out here living the world and living in my own truth. It's from a radio station perspective. We started a series called Stopping the Music every day at 5 o'clock, because I needed a place to find some therapy and to talk through everything that was happening in the world, with all of my identities converging at the same time. And so every day at 5 o'clock, we go live on Facebook and on our website with different guests, people doing the work in the community, as a place for us to talk, listen, and vent. Because it's just so much going on. If we're talking about George Floyd, if we're talking about Breonna Taylor, if we're talking about the trans women and the trans men who have also been killed at the same time, all of my identities are converging, and all of them are troubled all at the same time. So I think my opportunity with the radio station is just to have a space where we can speak about these things and then uplift and amplify folks who are doing the work. People who are going to feed people from the north side to the south side for folks who are in food deserts, right? There's people doing that work. There's people doing work around violence prevention in our neighborhoods. They need to be amplified. I think that's is at the core of what I'm interested in right now, is just making sure we're amplifying the messages, the positive messages that never can make this 9 o'clock news, because there isn't enough time. And that's not the news people are interested in, right? So that's where my focus has been. So thank you for that question. So with that, I've got plenty of questions, y'all. So I mean, we can just keep talking here. I hope questions come from the audience as well. But what sort of gives you hope in all of this? There's a lot going on in the world. Stefanie, I saw your article. I want to start with you here. I saw your article about battling COVID and your family doing that. With everything going on in the world, what's giving you hope right now? And you look great, so hopefully you're feeling much better.
I think for me, really in life, what gives me hopes is like the little wins. Growing up, when I came out, one of the biggest little wins I had was like this little girl, and it's happened multiple times since then, but like they reach out to me on Instagram, on social media, and just kind of tell me that I've inspired them. So for me to hear that, and to hear that I can inspire young girls to be open about themselves. And, she told me that she told her mom that she was bisexual. And I was, I responded, I was just like, I'm so thankful that you reached out to me, because it warmed my heart, so with that, it's like the little wins. And then when it comes to the COVID thing, I'm just thankful and so grateful that my family was safe. My mom being in the hospital and stuff, the minute she came home, even though she wasn't 100%, that was a little win. To see her come home from the hospital was huge for our family, and just kind of gave us all hope. So, I'm just trying to focus on some positives in life. I know, with society right now, there's not many, but to take those little ones and really hold on to them is important for me.
Yeah. I'm glad your mom came home too. I was reading the article and I was like, wow, this is a lot. So I'm just glad y'all are all feeling better and safe.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Tracy, what's giving you hope today?
With the reader media in general was already having troubles before COVID. So we lost like 90% of our advertising overnight. And so what gives me hope is that somehow in 3 or 4 months in, we have not laid off any editorial people. We've not furloughed. In fact, we gave them Juneteenth off paid. We've given them extra PTO days when they've needed it paid. We've done as much as we can to hang on to our team as possible. And I will continue to do that. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen every month. I like make it one day at a time through this crisis. But I'm hopeful because we've made it this far together, and our team is really stronger, I think, for the fight. Same at Windy City Times. So, in general, it's been very difficult. My partner's been gone since February with her mom in Ohio. So she's kind of in lockdown in her retirement community. This is off the record. She's been in her retirement community with her for 4 months. She can't leave either. Her mom can't leave and she can't leave, or she can't come back if she leaves. So that's been really hard. I'm very grateful for Zoom. That I've learned Zoom in this crisis is great. I actually feel like our whole shift is going to be much more Zoomy future for our whole team. I don't expect our office to actually ever come back to what it was physically in an office. I think we're going to not have the same kind of office environment. So I'm hopeful that some of the changes we've done are for making us stronger for the better, and that we are maybe emotionally more supportive of one another in ways that we weren't before. Certainly we have a staff we inherited was all but one person was white. And when I came on board a year and a half ago, we now are 30% people of color. And I think during this crisis, people have gotten closer to understanding one another a little bit better. All the, DEI inclusion training in the world can't really make up for the real world experiences of people that are going through crisis. And I feel like we're working through a lot of that in real time. So I'm hopeful that we'll come out of this stronger, and that as a community we'll be better because we're confronting these things that have been, swept under the rug for so long. I generally am an optimist, even though my pessimist side has been pulling and yanking at me for the last 4 months. But in many ways, when you're the boss, you also have to try to see the future. You have to plan for the worst, but hope for the best, and really lead your team by example. So I'm hoping that I'm learning more leadership skills in all of this too, because it's been one of the most difficult crises I've had to face as a business owner. I mean, I'm the publisher, I'm hired help at the Reader, but I own the Windy City Times. So I'm learning a lot as I go in doing this.
And I think it's amazing what you've been able to do with Windy City Times and the Reader, still being free, printed publications in the city of Chicago, providing great content.
Yeah.
Jeremy, what's giving you hope?
Honestly, it's those stories like Tracy just shared. Again, being a Chamber of Commerce, we know, of course, the significant impact that COVID has had on small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, every day that we hear a story about one of our members still being open, they were able to land a new contract. All those are wins to show that we're slowly moving toward the right direction. We had a number of members that were for sure impacted. We haven't, based on surveys, we haven't had anyone to say they've been forced to close permanently. There have been, of course, people have had to, make some changes with employees and some adjusted hours of operations, but no one has had to permanently close, and so we're very excited to hear that. So again, just those stories, knowing that our small business community is still surviving and they're they're still pushing forward. And so those are the things that are giving me hope to know that we are going to get through this.
Love it. Got questions, y'all. Exciting. All right, here we go. The first one from Jack. As we continue to talk about inclusivity within the LGBTQ plus community, often our trans siblings are left out. What, if anything, is being done to include our trans siblings in the sports world? This is an interesting question. I know that there has been a case, and everybody on this panel, keep me honest. There's a case, I believe, in Connecticut that was been raised in regards to trans folks participating in sports. I think it was the Secretary of Education, DeVos, recently was threatening to pull funding if they didn't change the way in which they align their inclusive process. In Connecticut, I believe there's 2 trans women there who are in track and field, which has raised this case and people filed suit, etc. I think it's still a challenge for some cities and states to actually see trans folks as equal participants in sports. Any thoughts?
Well, certainly this is going through a lot of court. I think there's going to be a lot of litigation. What people don't understand is that in order for someone to participate, they still have to meet some regulatory, like there are requirements, and every sport has different requirements. The Olympics have different requirements. These aren't things that just happen overnight. People are meeting those terms of their sport. And I'm grateful that a lot of the international sports bodies are dealing with this issue. I think the more difficult question down the line, and this, even the Oscars are being challenged on this, is the gender binary in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the stars of the TV show Billions, who's non-binary, is challenging the Oscars on the gendered categories. So there is a huge debate there, because clearly, in general, women competing with women and men competing with men creates a more fair playing field for those individuals, right? So how do we include the non-binary? How do we include transgender people is kind of handled sport by sport right now. And I think over the next 10 or 20 years, as this becomes even more of a larger footprint issue, there's going to be some really bad court decisions on this that are going to hurt youth. And there's going to be I think some positive move forward, like there has been at the international level. But it's a really difficult, as our society has created this separation for, in some cases, good intentions that are now hurting individual people. So I don't know that there's something that we know could immediately come of that court case. Betsy DeVos is just evil all around on everything she does. So, if you're on her side, you're on the wrong side on this issue. She doesn't understand the inclusion issue of these transgender female athletes who have been taking female hormones, who are otherwise meeting the scientific and medical definitions that they need to in order to compete in these sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think with all that being said, I think it is a nuanced issue that a lot of people don't get. So I think the panels like this can help us have those conversations around gender. And I think it's worth us talking about gender being seen on a spectrum, right? I'm sitting here as a masculine or centered woman. I do not fit into any particular binary, right? But where I sit has also been more accepted. Right. So I give this example often, is that when I was in grammar school, I didn't get bullied for being on the boys basketball team. It was a cool thing that I could play with the boys. Right. But I had a friend who was also in my same grade, who was male and effeminate, where he felt like he needed to have a knife in his shoe. And it wasn't acceptable for him if he wanted to be on the cheerleading team or do anything that could be in alignment with being feminine, right? Our experiences were totally different in the same exact school. And so I think that we have a lot of assumptions and boundaries to break down when it comes to gender and how we view gender in society. It is not a black and white issue. All right. Oh, y'all good, Jeremy and Steph? Steph, drinking.
I'd like to say that being a part of this panel, you guys are teaching me so much. I feel like a lot of times when I'm on panels, especially for the LGBTQ community, like I actually end up learning more than what I'm telling. So I just want to say that I appreciate the three of you guys for speaking and being true to yourselves. So just keep talking, guys.
I think the audience is here for you.
True. 100%.
I don't know why.
Let's see, we've got some other questions here. DeWan, excuse me if I mispronounce your name. What ways can we create an inclusive environment without stepping over boundaries? Sometimes people like to keep their work life and personal life separate. Jeremy, maybe this is a good one for you.
Yeah, so I'll just throw out a thought. So I think one of the ways, Tracy kind of talked about it earlier, was really just through, I think, just training. You don't necessarily have to, again, force people to, be a part of your LGBTQ employee resource group, but you do need to make sure that everyone who works at your company knows how to engage anyone, regardless of whether they're out or not. And so I think really just making sure that all of your employees have the right training, know how to communicate effectively with other people, making sure to, train people to ask each other about their pronouns as a way of doing it. I think, so that might be one of the best ways, is really just through training and really just making sure that folks have the right understanding of engaging with coworkers. Of course, a lot of things are really just systematic, just making sure that you have, good insurance that is inclusive of LGBTQ folks, making sure that you have bathrooms are inclusive of LGBTQ folks. So if they're not going to necessarily want to be out and say, hey, I'm part of the community, at least just making sure that you have created the office environment to be welcoming and inclusive of those people, I think is a way that you can get started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else want to take that one?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And one of the things that people are starting to finally understand is that racism is not a Black person's issue to solve, and homophobia shouldn't be an LGBTQ person's issue to solve by themselves. And so allies in a corporate environment are the most important thing that we have. There are more of them usually, and they affect policy and change usually in the C-suite and in the top of the companies is where you have fewer openly LGBTQ people. There are certainly exceptions, but usually it's white cisgender men that are near the top, or women. And so those people are the ones that can help make those changes company-wide. We have some good examples of corporate activism during the Gay Games, which I was really involved with in 2006. One of the biggest corporate activism moments happened when Kraft stood by their employees when they were called, a boycott was called on them for sponsoring the Gay Games. They stood up, they said, no, this is the right thing to do for our employees. And it was a straight, man, last name Firestone, who gave this incredible email to the entire company that obviously got out to the world. And I thought, that's the person we need in the C-suite, who's willing to risk a boycott for their company. And you know what? That means people down the line are going to start feeling more comfortable at work. It takes some people decades. I just saw a story the other day about an 80-year-old man just coming out of the closet, right? Some people may never come out, and you should never force them to come out. LGBT is a weird thing. We can hide it. Most people can't hide their identities like LGBTQ people and maybe disabled people. Those two groups of people should never be forced to talk about what that is in their lives until they're ready. If you're a hypocrite voting against me, like Jesse Helms or let's just say there's Lady G in the Senate, maybe I'm okay with that being someone being forced out. But otherwise, let people live their lives, make the place comfortable for them to be out. And they will, if they want to come out, they'll come out. If they don't worry about it. They are protected. That's what your job is, to protect their jobs and nothing more.
100%. And I think the recent rulings in the Supreme Court around, folks not being able to be fired for being LGBTQ, I mean, what a milestone. And when we think about that in 2020, that is still something you can be fired for, let's just start with how much more work we have to do. Right. So I think people not feeling comfortable being out, there's so many reasons for that. And so, I think it's up to the courts. When court decisions like that happen, it doesn't force people to do anything different, but it makes people think a little bit. Right. And so then it takes people inside of those companies who are out, to sort of take the risk and speak up and advocate. And that's why I think that there's.
Yeah, the WNBA is a perfect case.
Yeah.
They have stood by, like the Girl Scouts versus the Boy Scouts. The WNBA has been there for players to make the road available for Stefanie to come out. You had those early pioneers coming out in other leagues, as well as the predecessor leagues to the WNBA. They're a great example of a positive workplace. And I don't know, Stefanie, if they do trainings or other kinds of things that you've experienced, but from the outside, it looks phenomenal.
Yeah, I was gonna say something. I was gonna be silent the whole time. I know. No, actually, it's exactly what you said. We have been lucky enough, so we actually don't really do training, which I don't know if people will find surprising or not, but I think it's just something that the women who started the league have kind of trailblazed for us in the way of a really safe environment in the WNBA. It's kind of like what Tracy said too. It's not just the people in the LGBTQ community, but it's the allies. We have a lot of straight women in our league too, who, I have never heard a derogatory statement towards someone, something negative. We're women around women who like women. And you would think that there would be some type of maybe uncomfortableness, within the locker rooms or something, but there's nothing. And I think that is exactly what made me feel comfortable being myself and saying that I do like women as well. And I think the WNBA, we have done I'm proud to be a part of them, because I think we've done an amazing job of creating that safe environment for inclusivity.
Mm-hmm. So big ups to all the allies on this call who are going to leave here doing amazing things and speaking up when needed, because there will be spaces, right, where we will not be allowed in. There are spaces where folks on this panel will not be allowed in the conversation. And so there are things that are heard and said that we would never know even existed. But you will be in those moments, and you have an opportunity to create change in those moments. Because I think it's about changing hearts and minds. And that doesn't happen with strangers. That happens with people that folks know. Let's see, we got another question. Elise, what's happening? A mother of a teenager. I've noticed lots of LGBTQ representation on teen TV shows, movies, and social media, which is great towards making it so much more acceptable and less unacceptable to the masses. How old or young were you when you all came out? Oh goodness, okay, yeah, coming out stories. I know you all got one, okay, keep those on deck. And then, by the way, we're Sky season ticket holders. Love you, Steph. I couldn't scream it the way that she wrote it, but. So Steph told her coming out story a little bit earlier. So Tracy, what's your coming out story? I don't know if I've ever heard it.
Yeah, I came out around 1978 or 9 in high school, but I didn't have a girlfriend or anything. So sometimes having the girlfriend is the reason you come out, because, you know, but I had a friend of mine that was dating another friend of mine on a softball team, and they were getting shit from the rest of the softball team. Really? Okay. But so I stood up for them, and I kind of was like, why am I'm standing up for them because it's the right thing to do. And my parents had gay friends, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gay too. And so this one friend of mine gave me this book called Loving Someone Gay. And it's a fantastic book still to this day. It's been updated since then. But it was a book you would give to a parent or a friend when you were coming out. And she gave me this book, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm gay. So it was like really weird. And then in college, I came out with, you know, bells a-blazing. But I didn't mean it was easy, because I was in this journalism program, and all my professors were telling me that it was fine to be openly gay, but just know that the career you've wanted to be since you were 10 years old is not open to you. And that was paternalistic. It wasn't meant to be mean. But I attempted suicide at sophomore year in college, in part because I thought everything I ever wanted to be, which was a journalist, because both my parents were, I was gonna not be able to be it. And so my poetry teacher at the time was a very, very sweet man. And I had luck, I was like fate that I had his class during that semester. So when I came back to class, I wrote a poem about it. And he wrote in the margins of my poem, "It gets better." And I'm not lying, because that's now this famous saying that Dan Savage uses, but he wrote, "It gets better." He didn't say anything else. But I knew what he did was risking his whole career, because I knew what he was saying to me in those 3 words was that he was gay. He was married to a woman in that department, and he was telling me it was going to get better for me. He eventually came out and is an award-winning international poet, Mark Doty, and he saved my life, because I knew then that no matter what I did in my life, nobody was going to tell me who I could be or who I could love. And it's why I think my whole life is that pivot point made me a different person. That attempt at suicide changed my life in a way that said, well, I could be dead now, or I could be me now. And nobody's going to tell me I can't be me now. So it's my choice to be here, and I'm going to live it the way I want to live it. So that, I mean, it was kind of a dramatic coming out, but it was like, in many ways, it saved my life.
Wow. Big ups to Doty.
Yeah.
Because we need you here, Trace. Yeah. Jeremy, Alabama, coming out in Alabama.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, Tracy. That sent chills all up and through me. Couldn't imagine what the city would be like without you. So I came out at the age of 16. The first person that I came out to was my best friend. It was coincidentally it was the day of the Super Bowl when Janet Jackson performed. We were watching the game, and I grabbed her phone, and so it was, you know, how Tracy said, usually when someone's coming out, it's because of they're dating someone or, you know, something that's going on. And there was this guy who, you know, when it's your first your first love, you think it's everything. And so I had all those feelings. And so came out to my best friend. And of course, she was like, oh, I know. And so that one worked out well, and they gave me hope to move on. And then that summer, I was staying with my dad and his wife and my step siblings. So my dad had just gotten remarried, and so my stepbrother, well, my stepsister, was very out at that time, which for me was a very, very new experience. I had never, ever been around anyone that open, that out in the community. And so, so I got a lot of confidence to do so from her experience. And so I'm a lot better at writing things. And so I wrote out this long letter and then gave it to my dad. And then at the time, my mom was living in Georgia. And so my dad called my mom. My dad was like, when's the next time you're going to be home? 2 hours later, my mom was in Alabama. So we're in the car. My mom was crying. There was this whole ordeal going on. So it was a rough patch initially, like maybe about a couple of months. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen Masters of None, but if so, you know, and I always say her name wrong. Lena Waithe, her from The Chi.
Lena Waithe.
Yes.
I got you. Yeah.
Thank you. If you all know, she's on that show. On the second season, she comes out, her character comes out to her mom. And her mom is, you can see that she's really scared for her being a Black woman and then now being a Black woman who is a lesbian. And so it wasn't until like watching that story that I was able to realize what the concern was that my mom had. And so it wasn't necessarily that there was, you know, I hate this, I don't like this. It was really just the fear of the community and how others were going to respond to it. But I've been very fortunate. Thank you, Elise, for being a supportive mother as well. It really does make all the difference for your children as they go to school, as they get ready to go to college and go to, you know, navigate their own professional and personal lives. I am definitely 100% sure that if I did not have that support, I probably wouldn't be able to work here at the Chamber. I probably wouldn't have come out in college and other places like I have. And so that was my story, and cheers to you, Elise.
Yeah. I knew in high school, came out in college. My mom said, I just thought you'd always keep it a secret. I didn't think you'd ever say anything. And then my dad, I came out to him about 10 times. So it was just a steady thing. It just had to keep happening. Today, family totally supportive. Dad's been the sidetrack, comes to all the gay bars where I do events, and my mom couldn't be more supportive. I got religious family that they do their own thing, but overall, so much support and love. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks, Tracy, Jeremy, Steph, for this great panel and this great discussion. I'm gonna actually pass it back to Watson to close us out. And so thanks so much. Oh, we can't hear you.
Yep, I saw my computer was like, you are still muted.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists. Steph, I was like you, I learned so much today. And just grateful to have conversations that don't feel like fluff, right? That actually have some substance to them that people can take away and hopefully use some of what they learn in their day-to-day lives, whether it's, you know, having tough conversations, talking about work and balancing it. For all of our season ticket holders, thank you. We know that this season is a very tough season to be supporting the Sky, so we are extremely grateful to have you and to know that you all always have our backs. If you want more information on the season, all of that stuff is on our website, so chicagosky.net. And then if you want to keep the conversation going, you can find us on Instagram at Chicago Sky. And we look forward to seeing you at a game, hopefully when the world opens back up and we're allowed to go back outside. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.